So the basis of that argument was historical validity and why a skeptically minded person would believe the documents based on that historical validity test. And you said that there was only one religion that passed that test. It was Christianity, right?
I never said that.
At least to that degree.
I never said that.
Why not? Well, I mean,
why not?
I'm sorry. I forgot what you said. Go ahead. Just reiterate so I can ask my next question.
If you were to tell me that Muhammad never existed, I would say you're irrational.
Right. That's what I was
The overwhelming historical evidence is Muhammad really lived from about 570 to 630. If you were to tell me that Siddhartha Gautama Buddha never lived, I would say you're irrational. The historical evidence is Siddhartha Gautama Buddha did live. So, if you were to say to me, the avatars of Hinduism are historical people, I'd say you're irrational. Because in the Vedas and Upanishads, you don't have historical narrative. You have mythology. It's mythology to communicate truth, religious truth. But you see, when you come up against Jesus Christ, you're coming up against an historical person who really lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead. And so the question becomes, was he a farce? Is he an idiot? A megalomaniac? Or is he the truth?
So you brought up Muhammad, which was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
The historical validity of everything he did is 1,000 times more reliable than what Jesus Christ did.
Really? Based on what?
The conquests that he did across the Middle East and the sheer effect that he made during his own lifetime on thousands and tens of thousands of people. It's indisputable that he led armies. The man was real. He had children. They took over after him. There's a lineage that follows behind him. So if the historical validity of the Bible, which is 4 books, is true and gives the validity to the story of the raising of the dead, then why isn't the Quran 10 times, 100 times more valid than the Bible with even more rigorous testing and even more evidence in archaeological evidence? Why wouldn't you apply the same test and come to the conclusion that since it's more recent, more well-established, has more evidence, and had even more far-reaching consequences, then why isn't that? Why aren't Muhammad's claims just as valid? Why aren't you Muslim?
Thanks for raising that question. I am not a Muslim because I have read the Quran. I've read portions of the Hadith. And the evidence is I would not trust Muhammad to tell me the truth about God based on how he treated people, based on what he taught, based on how he died, and based on what happened after his death. The evidence is he was an historical person. The evidence is if you trust him, you're making a big mistake.
But you're coming at that from a biased perspective. You're saying that what I already believe is right, and that what Muhammad did was wrong. Muhammad was claiming that he was mandated by God to do the things that he did, that all the things he did were godly. Who are you to criticize that? Shouldn't you be as objective as possible and open your mind and say, perhaps the things he did are godly, perhaps the things he did are legitimate, and the way that we should live our lives? It seems like a double standard.
All right, now, you're intelligent, but I'm not going to jump on this one and roast you too fast. So you better talk a little more and explain to me, what are you saying exactly?
I'm saying that if you applied those tests after you were a Christian, your Christian biases are telling you that what he did was wrong. The way he lived his life, the way he treated people, when he died, etc. Those tests are biased by your Christian experience. So why not reevaluate your criteria and say that because Muhammad is more recent, because it is more documented, because it's more historically valid, the things that he said and did are much more believable from a historical perspective. Undoubtable that he was alive and that the Quran, and there's a lot of other history surrounding him. Why isn't that more valid? Why not cast aside what you already believe and say, perhaps this is the way, perhaps this is what is moral, perhaps this person is the Messiah?
Do you have biases?
Of course I do.
All right. So we all have biases, right? We all have prejudices. The challenge for us as thinking human beings is to learn to be as objective as we can. So, objectively, the reason that I cannot trust Muhammad is because, first of all, he lived 500 years after Christ, which means he obviously never met Jesus. He had great respect for Jesus, but he denied the deity of Christ. The eyewitnesses, those who lived with Christ and saw Christ, insisted Christ claimed to be God.
But people who lived with Muhammad said, didn't dispute his holiness.
Yeah, Muhammad never claimed to be God. Never was.
He claimed to be...
He'd have chopped your head off if you'd have worshipped him. You worship Allah. You don't worship Muhammad.
Yeah, but he claimed his holiness. He claimed his that he was a mouthpiece. That he was that people around him undoubtedly believed it.
Yes.
So if those people believe Jesus Christ and that's valid, then why aren't the people who believe Muhammad valid too? Just as valid, if not more so.
Muhammad contradicted himself by having great respect for Jesus. Well, how did Muhammad meet? How did he find out anything about Jesus? He never met the guy. He obviously respected the eyewitnesses. And so he read the Gospels. He was aware of them, the Gospel story about Christ. All right? But then he contradicts Christ's central claim to be God in human form.
Why would he do that?
Exactly.
Why would he do that if he was so intimate with those texts?
Because he contradicts the eyewitness. He lives 500 years after Christ. He claims to be more reliable than the eyewitnesses to give you an accurate picture of Jesus. What's wrong with me saying Jesus was a Republican?
Perhaps those eyewitness accounts aren't reliable, and Muhammad saw that.
Then fine. What's the evidence that the Gospels are not reliable, and that Muhammad, who lived over 500 years after Christ, is more reliable?
They claim that he rose from the dead for what? I mean...
Yeah, and if there is a supernatural God, you can have resurrection.
Yeah, supernatural. For something to be supernatural is a contradiction. So.
No, it's not a contradiction.
Sure it is.
It's a basic philosophical point.
What does supernatural mean?
Supernatural means beyond the natural. You see, you as an atheist limit reality to matter and energy. But you can't live that out. Because you know that there is something more to love than just a chemical reaction or just a sex drive. There's this free will. And as soon as you talk about free will, you're out of atheism. Because if atheism is true, you've limited reality to matter and energy. So what I call free will is just my chemical reactions in my brain. From your perspective as an atheist. No, my experience is free will is real, which shows there's more to reality than just matter and energy. There's got to be some type of supernatural God who creates us with this ability to freely choose.
Nobody here can honestly say that they would like to emulate that behavior. Nobody. That's not good behavior. So if there's this objective morality that you say, then why is scorning those that you perceive you gave everything to, why is that not objectively good?
When God sent his only son Jesus to bleed and die on a cross to buy us back, that was the antithesis of scorn. That was the essence of love. So the overwhelming evidence of the Bible is that God loves you more than anybody does. He loves you more than any human being does. But you're right. Love is not going to motivate God to force you to spend eternity with him in heaven. Heaven would be worse than hell. If you want to live your life separate from God, God says, all right, you'll spend eternity separate from me. That is hell.
If it's okay, then you can just do whatever you... Why does it have to be so horrible? Why does it have to be sulfur and brimstone and every nightmare humanity has ever come up with? It's just so ridiculous.
Really? Well, did Jesus talk about maggots in hell?
No, that was Dante.
Yeah, thank you. So why on earth would you trust Dante to give you an accurate picture of hell? Has Dante ever been to hell?
I mean,
so if it's not the way Dante depicted it, then how is it?
Well, I'm not going to answer that one for you, because you're smart enough to go to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Read them for yourself. Don't take it from me, and please do not take it from Dante. Go to the source documents, the Gospels. Read them for yourself, and ask yourself, what does Jesus say about hell? Now, I'll start you on the path. And the Bible talks about hell as fire and outer darkness, which obviously means it's talking metaphorically. Fire and darkness don't go together, do they? The Bible also talks about hell as being separation from God. not a photograph. In light of the fact that God is not a physical being, what does separation from God really mean? Hard question. The Bible does use horrible, horrible language to describe hell. But if you check it out carefully, that is in parable, which is a story that is painting a word picture. So, the same way that you'll flunk out of Texas State if you don't learn to respect literary style, so when you read the Gospels and it's parable, metaphor, hyperbole, or historical narrative, didactic, clear ethical teaching, you better learn to distinguish between different literary styles.